Good morning and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I am going to be your facilitator for today's session. And so today we have with us Tam Cummings, and she's going to be talking about a variety of topics having to do with should you be concerned about certain behaviors and care at home. So let me tell you just a little bit about Tam before she gets started. Dr. Tam Cummings founded her company in 2009 with a mission to inspire, educate, and empower dementia caregivers. Now her professional gerontological practice in the Texas Hill Country is recognized as one of the leading educators of dementia caregivers and program design for dementia care nationally. Tam, welcome to our session today.
Thank you, Glenda. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Where's our sponsor?
Okay. Good. I did not get any information this week. If you are our sponsor and you would like to unmute your phone, we'd like to hear what you have to say today. Okay, I'm assuming that we had wires crossed and Vitas Healthcare is not with us today, but we do appreciate their sponsorship. Nevertheless, they provide services, hospice services all over the country. So we welcome them and we appreciate your sponsorship.
We do, and God bless all our hospice folks. Y'all just do such an incredible thing. Okay, well, so let's start talking about, we've been home for the holidays. We've seen folks, because of COVID, may not have seen them last year, may not have seen them as much. And so what are things that you would be looking at? So Glenda, this involves detective work. One of the things where adult children get really unhappy is they expect to come home and something's obviously wrong with mom and dad's going to tell us all about it. And the reality is, no, that's not going to happen. In fact, for many families, you will find that if you try to have a discussion with the parent who is not ill, you'll meet a blank wall. You will meet a lot of resistance. You will be told this is none of your business. And the reason is because it's their marriage and you're their child. They will act completely different with me than they will with you simply because I'm not their child. And so for a lot of adult children, this starts off the whole process of mom or dad being ill with a lot of anxiety because it seems so obvious to you that something is wrong with this parent, and yet you can't get that parent to see something's wrong, and you can't get the other parent to give you help and support so that you can get them to a doctor, get them to testing, find out what is going on that has caused these changes in your loved one. Another thing, and this is something I ran into this weekend when I went to see a family for the Area Agency on Aging in the Capital Region of Texas, is that the main caregiver, who was the spouse, also had dementia and no one had noticed. And this is something that's also very common, Glenda, is the family gets so focused on the parent who is obviously ill that they overlook what's happening to the other parent. And what's happening to the other parent can be a number of things: the stress of care, the stress of doing care during COVID, the stress of being locked down and being alone all the time with somebody who has dementia. That takes a toll and an effect. Not being able to do normal things that you would have done, go to church, go to your family, have more outside contact. And then the last thing is that the other parent has dementia too. They're just in a different stage. They're presenting better. And so when you think about what you saw over the holidays with your parents, you have to be very, very honest with yourself of what you're actually seeing. So to give you an idea, the detective work, it involves us doing a lot of things, and it involves us having to take a critical mindset. It's not judgment. I'm looking for something different than how my mother normally kept her house. Is the house clean the way it was when you were growing up? Or Are rooms of the house shut off and it's apparent nobody goes in there? Is the main area your loved one is living in starting to be cluttered or trashy or dusty? And does your person suddenly appear to be hoarding? And Glenda, they're not actually hoarding. They're bringing stuff into the house, but don't remember the steps to take trash out of the house. So there's two different things that can be going on there. So you have to really look around and see what is going on in your parents' house that's different. You got to look at the money. You got to find a way to look at the money. Is anybody watching the money? And you got to be realistic. I have watched family members who were the powers of attorneys say, well, I don't want to intrude on my parents' privacy. And by the time they decided to intrude, the parents had lost $4 million in the stock market. I have seen people that didn't want to intrude, and by the time they intruded, the parents had only saved $135,000 for the rest of their life, and he had given away $100,000 of it. And they were both in their late 70s. There was no go back and find a job, and he had dementia. If your loved one's on a computer, you better get them off the computer. You better put in some passcodes, some passwords where they can't get to money. They will refinance the house. They will buy cars. A lady called me a few months ago, and her husband had bought 6 or 7 cars over the course of 6 months. And each one of those cars was a $45,000, $55,000 car. He would bring it home. He couldn't figure out how to make it work because, Glenda, I don't know what year your car is, but they no longer use keys. There's a button to press now. And I don't know what model car you have, but the car will suddenly take over and drive you back into your correct lane. It will beep and alert you somebody's too close to you. And he couldn't figure out how to use these cars. So he would come in and tell his wife, I don't like that car. And he would take it back and get another one. And she called me thinking, well, here's an odd thing he's doing. And because of her own stress level, she didn't realize what she was witnessing was somebody with a bank account in dementia. And he couldn't understand how to use any new car. And he was going to get the cars because he couldn't figure out how to work the last one. So he would go and get another one. And as you know, Glenda, once you drive that car off the lot, when you come back a week later and say, I don't like this car, they don't give you back your check. They give you back a portion. So in a very short amount of time, he had gone through several $100,000 that was non-recoverable. So as hard as it is, understand that we know you're not out to get your parents' money. We know you're looking out for them in the best way possible. And the best way possible in many cases is you've got to get this person away from a computer, away from an iPad. I get stuff in the mail all the time offering to buy my house. I get stuff in the mail all the time offering to redo my mortgage. I know it's trash mail. I know I'm not redoing that mortgage. Your parents don't necessarily know that. Does that make sense, Glenda?
Absolutely. I've heard that story from friends.
It is devastating, and they can very quickly lose everything that has been saved. You have to be looking at all parts of the house. What does the yard look like? Is there no longer a yard guy coming? Is your parent no longer doing the yard? Is it bed dying full of weeds? Is it not being cared for in the usual manner? So when I get to a home, Glenda, to see that family, my critique starts at the driveway.
Yeah.
I am looking at the yard. I am looking at the house. Is the house being cared for? Is paint peeling? I am looking for clues. Now, you, the adult children who are in your parents' house for the holiday, you need to look at the mail. You need to look and see what's coming at the mail, because sometimes that's when families realize the electric bill hasn't been paid for 3 months. The mortgage company is notifying you because you've paid the mortgage twice in the last month. Look at the mail. Look at what's coming through. This is part of doing due diligence. When I'm in someone's house, I'm not reading their mail, but if I see stacks of mail, I am certainly alerting the family caregiver that I'm there to meet with that this needs to be looked at and addressed. Because the second reason is that, Glenda, there's a lot of mail that you and I get that looks like it's a bill. And it looks like it's a bill that says you need to send me a check right now, And this is a generation of people that paid their bills. And once they send that first check to that first group looking for a donation, their mailbox will begin to be flooded with things looking for donations, and people get rid of their money without realizing what they're doing. So you're not snooping. And for some of you, it may feel like you're doing this. You're doing your detective work because you're going to need this information, either because you're going to need to call Adult Protective Services or because you need this information to help the physician understand what is going on with your loved one. Is that making sense, Glenda?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Now, it's not just the yard I'm looking at. I look in the fridge too. Now, I don't do this right in front of you. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm trying to be very sneaky. But Irma Bombeck said there aren't really blue foods other than blueberries. We shouldn't have blue food lurking around. So is there stuff in the fridge that shouldn't be in there? Are there cans of food in the pantry that shouldn't be in there? Did you notice when your loved one was cooking that they were using salt instead of sugar or sugar instead of salt? You've got to look around and see what is around them. And one of the big things that I hear, Glenda, is, well, we're just going to leave them with these boxes of food and all mom has to do is put it in the microwave. Except what we find happens is, number one, that food is terrible. It is full of sodium, and chances are this person's on a blood thinner or has vascular issues and they don't need this sodium. This is processed food. This isn't real food. This isn't food that's healthy or good for them. And they don't really understand how to work the microwave. So I can't tell you the number of times that I have been in a house and looked in the microwave, and the food that was in there was food that had been put in there days before. And once the microwave was opened by the daughter, the mother went, "Oh yeah, I'm cooking," and picked up the food and went to eat it. So they remember the first steps of putting the food in the microwave, but once the microwave dings, they either don't notice the ding, it dings only a couple of times, they can't figure out where the ding is coming from. Remember, sound is not being filtered because of brain damage. And so it is not at all unusual that people with dementia get sick from eating spoiled foods that they don't realize are spoiled. They don't realize they don't taste right. They don't realize this food should not be blue. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I've had a lady get up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m, turn on all the gas burners because she was cooking for a cat that didn't exist. The problem was, it was the middle of the night, her husband was asleep. The only way they found out was the daughter was visiting and heard the mother get up. And I have been in a home where the lady couldn't figure out how to turn her heat on and it was cold. So she had all the gas burners going on her stove, and a curtain separated her kitchen from her living room, which is where she was sitting. But every time a breeze blew, like somebody opened the door or the house wasn't in the best of condition, that sheet blew right into where that gas stove was lit. They turn the stove or the oven on and forget that it's on. They don't remember how to make microwaves work. The microwave in one house is completely different than the microwave in another house. And remember, microwaves are relatively new items. They're things that began to happen in the 70s and the 80s. And your person is going backwards in time, so they may not remember how to operate that anymore. And it is not at all uncommon that they start the process of putting the food in the microwave to cook it, but then don't remember how to get it out, don't remember that it's in there, and they simply go on with their day. And then that food may not be found for several days, and then they find it and think that it's edible. So we have to shut off stoves and ovens. I've been in homes where the spouse has a switch to turn on the stove and oven, because when they leave, they're afraid the person with dementia will turn the oven on. And then I think I even called you, Glenda, about this particular lady. She was originally from Mexico, and she was used to cooking for her family. And as I was standing there, she turned the gas burner on the stove, took a tortilla and began to cook it using her hands to turn it over the flame. And I just about had a cow on the spot of, oh my God. And the daughter said, what are we going to do? She's been cooking that way forever. And so you see things that are really, really dangerous that your loved one can be doing. And all of these things are signs that the doctor needs to be aware of. This may be the one thing that gets the doctor's attention, is that this lady is turning tortillas over on a live burning flame with her hands. So all of this stuff needs to go to the doctor. As I walk in the house, I'm not only looking at the house and at the yard, but Glenda, I'm also looking at the car in the driveway. And one of the most common things that I'm told is the reason my car is full of scratches and dings and dents is because other people keep hitting me. And the reality is the person with dementia is driving to the grocery store, and they're actually the person hitting all the other cars. It's not other people hitting them, it's them hitting other things. You remember, visual spatial function is being lost. And if I don't see things peripherally, it makes it really hard for me to back out of a parking spot. It makes it hard for me to see. And then you've also got to do your due diligence while you're there. Is the car registered? Is the car insured? Is everything up to date on the car? Does the car need to go away? And this is one of the hardest things to do, because driving the car, Glenda, meant you and I were almost to adulthood. We had reached 16. They gave us a card. We got keys. We're free to go. But the reality is, if your loved one has been diagnosed with dementia of any kind and has a car wreck, there's a very good chance your insurance isn't going to cover it, which means your family can be sued. Also, the highest form of accidental death in people over the age of 70 is being T-boned at a stop sign or a red light. And it's due to the natural aging loss of peripheral vision. We all lose some peripheral vision as we age. But the other thing is that people with dementia tend to look left, look right, and go. And they don't necessarily see red lights anymore. They're just going. And so because of that, they're a danger to themselves and a danger to others. But pay attention and look at the car. Are you seeing scratches and dings, things that your parent is going to tell you somebody else is causing? If there's more than one on there, they're the one causing it. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Sounds like we've got another important activity for caregivers, the detective. Advocate, detective, caregiver, it all is going together now.
And this detective part can be really, really emotional for you, the adult caregiver or the adult child, because they're all signs to me, to Glenda. These are very clear signs of dementia. These are very clear signs of somebody whose dementia is advancing, and they're signs that this person isn't safe. They're not safe to be home alone. And that means that just going through and trying to do these things for your parent are not only difficult, but they can cause a lot of emotion for you because it's reality right in your face. When you look around the bathroom, it's the same thing. Is the bathroom cluttered? Is it nasty? Or is it clean? Is the tub clean? I have been in bathrooms where the tub was now black. I have been in bathrooms where it's obvious no one has cleaned the sink. And then if your parent tells you they're taking a bath and they disappear for a little bit, is there a wet washcloth when they come out? Is the shower wet? Is there a wet towel somewhere? I could see the look on families' faces when I go through this part with them of, are you checking to see that there was actually a bath or a shower taken this morning? You could see the light bulb go off of, no, as a matter of fact, I haven't seen any towels come through the laundry. Check to see if soap and shampoo is being used. And remember, the purpose of bathing is to clean skin, not to have an argument, not to dunk somebody down in bubbly water. The purpose of bathing is to clean skin. And as we lose the steps of how to take a bath, we can still do washcloth baths. And if your person is in a licensed community, the state says this person needs to be bathed 3 times a week. So it's not like your loved one is out working on the highway. The bathroom shouldn't be a place for anger and annoyment, although it could be. but pay attention and look at what's going on around. And one of the things that bothers me about this picture, Glenda, is if you look at it, you'll notice that the dry cleaner is ready, or the blow dryer is ready to go right into the sink where the water is.
Yeah.
And so you just have to do your due diligence. You have to look around, and you have to determine, is this how my parent always lived, or is this something new and something different? You got to look at things like toothpaste. You got to check the dates on the prescription bottles. You got to count medication. So when I saw this family this past week, the father was doing the mother's medication, and the mother has a very complex medical history, and she is on dozens of medications. And the rule of thumb is you need to have an RN doing that. You need to have somebody really paying attention doing medication, especially multiple medications that must be given at multiple times of the day. And when I looked at the box, it was clear to me that something was wrong with the father, because the medications weren't laid out in any sort of sequence that made sense. And so that right there told me there was an issue. When I went to look at the basket of medications, it had a bunch of over-the-counter things in it, including things like apple cider vinegar pills. None of that over-the-counter stuff, none of those things work, Glenda. We have no proof that any of those things work, and certainly not apple cider vinegar. There is no positive effect for that. There's a lot of advertisements about it, but the FDA can find no effect of that. And you've got to remember, your parent is taking powerful medicine. So when you talk to the pharmacist or the doctor, you need to bring every single thing they take, including those over-the-counter supplements, because for the most part, they're not needed, but they can also interfere with the real medication. So I knew the husband wasn't doing the medicine right, and the daughter's now going to step in and do the medicine. But the other thing, Glenda, is that outside of the box of medication, there were 4 other bottles of prescription medication around the bedroom that the wife used. And as I looked at the medication, I asked the husband, what is this medication for? It's for my wife. I give it to her every day. Sir, the date on this bottle is from 2019 and it's half full. Yes, I give it to her every day. And he did that for 4 different bottles, prescription bottles of medication. And 2 of the bottles were actually his medication. And one of the bottles was something that is a Class A narcotic that you and I have to sign and show ID to get. The best medications in the world are at our grandparents' house or our parents' house, because they've got real painkillers. And he assured me his wife took this painkiller every day, and that bottle was from 2020, and it was 3/4 full. But he insisted that she took that medicine every day, and that tells you that there was something also wrong with the father. Does that make sense?
It's terrifying, but yes, it makes sense.
And I can't tell you how in most houses that is what I find. It is very complicated to sit down with a box of medicines and make sure that you get all of those medicines in the right slot for the right alarm to go off, so that your loved one takes them at the right time. And if one little thing interrupted Dad, somebody knocked on the door, the phone rang, he got up and left. And when he comes back, he doesn't really know where he is and putting the medicine together. So we've got to have an alert adult do that. And if your family is able to afford it, hire an RN to come in. They come in every 2 weeks. They do all of the medicines. And then they also do the refills. They call it all in for you and get everything checked. And nurses are trained to look for other things. So it's worth it to have that nurse there. Also need to look at the cabinets in the pantry. Poisons, in many cases, look like food staples. There's actually a rat poison that looks like a box of baking soda. And Glenda, I cannot tell you, in all this time, at least a dozen times I have opened someone's pantry and poison was right next to food. And so you've got to go through and look. You've got to make sure that the bleach and the Comet and those things are in this place, and food items are in a completely different place. But it tells you that something's wrong. and it tells you that you've got to pay more attention or you've got to begin to look at a different level of care for your loved one. You got to look at the dresser drawers. I get calls, Glenda, from buildings who say they're really upset with this lady because she keeps rinsing out her Depends or whatever her adult incontinent product is. And I know that we call them diapers. We're not supposed to. Diapers are something for children. These people are adults. They are wearing an adult incontinent product. But when they were children, when they were teenagers, when they were young ladies, polite people, especially women, polite women, wash out their unmentionables separate from the laundry, dry them and put them back in the drawer. So your loved one, your mother, doesn't necessarily recognize, because of brain damage, that she's got a set of Depends on, and once they're soiled, they need to be thrown away. It is very common that she will instead try to rinse them, dry them, and put them back in the drawers. So you've got to check the drawers as well. And you've also got to use your nose. If you're smelling urine, and urine smells like really strong ammonia, because once urine oxidizes, it becomes very similar chemically to ammonia, which is why it smells like that. But if you're smelling ammonia in your mother's closet, she's got soiled underwear in her drawers, and you need to find it and find a way to get rid of it, switch it out for fresh new ones, and just be aware that this is not an unusual thing for your mother to do. And I know at the end of each slide, Glenda, I'm going, does that make sense? But does that make sense?
Yes, it does. If you understand that there's brain damage, it makes perfect sense.
Now, there's a variety of handouts that we're going to send out today. And if you don't want to wait for the handouts, this is how you find it on Google. The first one is HAM-A. It stands for Hamilton Assessment in Anxiety, but it's all caps HAM-A. And what the Hamilton Anxiety Tool does is it allows you to look at your parent and get an idea of what their anxiety level is. And one of the things that we've discovered, Glenda, is that about 10 years before dementia becomes noticeable to families, we begin to see anxiety and depression in that parent, but we don't help them get to the doctor. We don't get the doctor to pay attention. We didn't realize this. So this tool allows you to look at your parent and make a judgment on what you're seeing. And it is measuring everything from their mood to whether or not they're having muscular aches and pains that don't seem to have a causation, or whether they're having sensory issues that don't seem to have a causation. They actually go back to anxiety. And so one of the tools that I want you to use on your loved one is I want you to use the HAM-A scale and see where you find your loved one on it, because this is one of the things that the doctor needs to see. You have to remember, you know your person best. This is not that doctor's mother or father. They need all the information you can give them, and you've got to give them that information in only a short amount of time. When I come into someone's house, I'm there for 2 to 4 hours. I have time to build a rapport. I have time to have a conversation. I have time to give them the donut or the sweet or the diabetic candy that I've brought for them. I have time to do that, which allows me to make a very in-depth assessment on them, which then goes to their physician. But it's the same thing you can do. By doing these handouts, you will then be able to give your parent's physician a much better idea of what's happening at home. If I just say to the doctor, my mother seems different, that gives them nothing to work with. If I go through a HAM-A scale and actually hand it to the physician, that's a much different response from the physician, because I'm actually giving information that medically that doctor is trained to understand and act on. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Yay, Glenda. Thank you, Glenda. Now, anxiety doesn't just simply stop with, I feel anxious today. Anxiety affects our body systems, muscular, sensory, and people who have cardiovascular events, cardiovascular surgery, people who have had heart attacks have anxiety and depression as a side effect of that event. And it goes back to my body failed me. My heart failed me, and it causes people to be anxious. What if it happens again? And when I get anxious, my heart then begins to change how it's beating, and that then makes me think, oh my God, it's going to happen again. And so it just becomes a circle. But you've got to do this assessment on your loved one. You're looking not only at cardiovascular symptoms, and understand cardiovascular means everything. It means blood pressure. It means they're on a blood thinner. It means they're on something to thicken their blood. It means that they're on something for high blood pressure. It means that they've got a pacemaker, a defibrillator, that they have AFib, that they've had a heart attack, that they have a shunt. I can't tell you how many times, Glenda, I've said to a family, do they have anything cardiovascular? And they'll say no. And then 15 minutes later, they're telling me about the massive stroke. That would be considered a cardiovascular event. So as you go through your HAM-A, it's going to have a list of things, and just look to see what you're seeing. Same thing with respiratory. Anxiety affects our upper and lower digestion, and that has to do with our vagus nerve, which is connected to our brain, our heart, and our upper and lower digestive system. So when I get acute anxiety, my heart begins to pound, I may get a headache, then my stomach gets upset, then I have diarrhea, or I throw up, I'm nauseous. All of those things are gastrointestinal. Genitourinary, a lot of times this has to do with males, but also some with females. But this has to do with maybe not being able to get an erection, having a weak pee stream. So it's going to be listed on there, things for you to look at if this is your dad you're looking at. And then autonomic systems, things that should work automatically, and then how your loved one's behaving during the interview. Now, you're not going to worry about that because you're not the person doing it. You're not actually sitting them down and doing this the way I would do it. You're simply checking off things that you see because you want your doctor to do the follow-up. That makes sense, Glenda?
Yes, it does.
Glenda says, all I do here is go, yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. No, I tell you, if it doesn't make sense, you know that. But it does. In this case, it does.
Now, as you take the start of this information, your detective work, and we've started now with the HAM-A, the anxiety measurement, as you take all this, remember, dementia is a brain disease. There are 128 identified dementias. We primarily deal with 9 of those dementias. We need to know which dementia your loved one has because it tells us how the disease will move through the brain, how it will attack the brain lobes. And each one of those brain lobes does certain things. So as that lobe becomes damaged, the person's behavior will then begin to change. So you're going to look at, does your loved one forget appointments or have difficulty keeping track of the time of day or the month or the year or the season? Are you noticing repetitive questions? When are we going here? Why didn't we do this? When are we going here? And you're hearing the same thing told to you over and over and over, or they call you at work 20 times a day and it's evident to you they don't remember they've already called you 19 times, or they forget that conversation y'all just had or that thing that happened last week or last month. All of those things are to bring you back to understanding your loved one is doing nothing on purpose. This is all driven by brain damage, and it's real. It's just that you don't see the damage until stage 6 of the disease. And it is only when your loved one's lost about 1 pound of brain tissue that you will finally see the look on the outside that indicates that they are sick. So this is the disease where people don't look sick until the very end of the disease. And so instead of being angry with your loved one, you've got to always remember it's brain disease. Glenda, I tell families that if you have to call 911, you will get a different response from paramedics if you tell them your loved one has dementia, if you tell them your loved one has brain cancer. They will treat your loved one more kindly, more respectfully, more gently if you say they have brain cancer than if you say they have dementia. So you have to remember, at the end of the day, all of these things that you're noticing happening are being driven because it is their brain that is damaged. One of the things I want you to look up is the IQ code. And this is how you'll Google it, in all caps, IQ code. The IQ code you're going to find really helpful because it's going to go all the way back to, did you see this stuff happening just today? Did you see it happening a few weeks ago? All the way back to, I saw this behavior 10 years ago. And it helps you, the family member, realize you haven't imagined anything. You really were seeing changes. You just didn't know what it was. And because in our country, we have ageism. Ask anybody over 60 and they'll tell you we have ageism. We are looked at differently. The doctor may say, what do you expect me to do? They're old. I expect you to treat them. What do you expect me to do? They have dementia. I expect you to treat them like a human. So the IQ code, excuse me, Glenda, I thought I was well, but I'm not well yet.
You're getting there.
I do feel better. So the IQ code is another form that's going to let you go to the doctor, let you talk to your family members, have them fill out an IQ code, but it's going to let you go back and look at, yeah, there really have been these things happening. And it's going to go from everything from family and friends' birthdays, addresses, occupations they should know. And understand, Glenda, when we go into house, I know you've seen this too, we find a drawer where they have written their address down over and over and over and then neatly folded the papers and put them up, or they've written their family's names down over and over and over. And we can even tell in the beginning it's the great-grandchildren, then it's the grandchildren, then it becomes my children, that we see their names written over and over again as the person realizes they're not able to remember this information. It measures recent events, conversations from a few days ago. Do they know their address and telephone? What day of the month? Where are things kept in the house? And where would things be when they're in a different place? If I didn't quite put that thing back where it went, would my loved one still be able to find it? It is that your loved one knows how to work familiar machines. And remember, Glenda, there was a big jump in 2007. We went from a house phone to the iPhone, to where now most of us no longer have landlines. We only have cell phones. And we went from a television that we got up and changed the channel on to televisions that are giant flat screens that have remote controls. And so very soon in the disease, your loved one may come to you, they certainly come to us and say, as they hold out their phone, something's wrong with this, it won't turn on my TV. And then a few minutes later, they'll come with the remote control and say, there's something wrong with this, it won't dial my daughter. Not being able to learn how to use new gadgets or new things in general. Not being able to follow a story or in a book or a story on TV or at the movies. And when they follow a conversation, as they get lost, Glenda, you will see this polite laughter. And I see it mainly when grandparents are dealing with younger grandchildren or great-grandchildren because they speak a different language than you and I do. They're talking about the Wi-Fi and the computer and the D&D game that they were playing with their buddies because they use discourse to communicate, but their headsets are broken, but now their headsets are wireless. And you will hear the grandmother or the grandfather do a polite chuckle, which is a social thing you and I do. And what it really means is I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm hoping I'll catch up. And so I'll give this light chuckle, which is not offensive, and you'll continue talking and then maybe I'll figure it out. And what it actually means is your loved one is very lost in the conversation. And do you notice them having trouble making decisions on everyday matters? And again, this IQ code is going to go back, Glenda, to 10 years. So for some of you, you may be shocked today when you read your IQ code and realize, my goodness, I was seeing these things for a long time and I just didn't know what it meant. And that's normal. This is not your field. This is not what you're a specialist in. Can they handle their money for shopping? Can they handle their financial matters, their pension, their bank, their mortgage? I knew a professor at a university, one of the top universities in the country. He was one of the best known professors. He sent over $8 million to a girlfriend in another country. And the girlfriend is actually a team of people. And what they try to do is keep this person online 24 hours a day, just wear them out constantly. Love you, love you, love you, coming to see you, but I need money. And the next thing you know, money begins to go. An early sign of dementia in some people is no longer being able to do basic arithmetic problems. Now, Glenda, this is going to become an issue for people younger than I am, because now when I give tests at conferences, they all pull out their iPhones to add up 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 5. Yeah. And we've stopped using numbers, stopped doing this. How much food they should be buying? Is the pantry full of food that they're never going to eat? Is the pantry full of old food? Do they understand how long it's been since they've really seen you? And are they able to understand and reason with what's going on around them? So the IQ code is going to be something that's very useful for you to help your family understand, to help you have a better idea of how dementia is a slow, subtle process that's been in place for a while. And you were not a bad caregiver, you're not a bad daughter or son or spouse because you didn't notice it. It's just that slow and subtle. And the IQ code may really fill you with some emotion because you hadn't thought about these things. You hadn't looked at them in quite that way. You have to watch for attention. Are they able to pay attention, or are they easily distracted? I think of this as the, yes, Glenda, I can pay it, squirrel. And now I have no idea what you and I were talking about before. Now, because you're caregivers, you may do some of this just from the stress of care about your loved one. Even if you're not physically doing care, just the stress of worrying about your loved one can make you think something's wrong as well. And so that's why when you look at your staging tool that you'll be sent today, your DBAT tool, stage 2 is family caregivers. You've got to be sure you understand you don't have dementia. Those are all normal things you and I do. It is normal for us to have difficulty paying attention when we're worried about someone. Okay. But in this case, when you feel it in yourself, it's stress, but for your loved one, it's something the doctor needs to be aware of. Are you noticing any language difficulties? Oh, and Glenda, before I forget, I want to go back to numbers. There are forms of frontal temporal dementia where the person loses a whole bunch of stuff, but they can still do incredible calculations. There are forms of frontal temporal dementia where the person loses the ability to use language, but they can suddenly paint like Rembrandt. And I've actually seen a family argue that even with the MRI in front of them and the report from a neurologist specializing in dementia, that their mother didn't really have this FTD. She was pretending she couldn't speak because look at her, she wanted people to notice how good her art was. And so part of this is you've got to be honest with yourself. When you're seeing something happen, it's happening because of something in the brain. In language, are you seeing word finding difficulties? Now, this is, again, scary for family members, Glenda. Everybody forgets a word, can't pull that word. And as we get older, we start to think, oh, crap, I'm getting it. If we have a family member with it, we think, oh, crap, I've got it too. All of us have trouble every now and then with a word. Part of it has to do with our age and how many words we know. And we all have trouble with names. I don't even bother remembering names. Years ago, my brain said, I don't care about the name of the family, but tell me about their person with dementia. And so families will come up to me at conferences and say, yes, I know you. I've talked to you. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are. They will say one thing about their dementia person, and I remember the conversation. So sometimes the brain just says, you know, I've met all the Johns I'm going to meet in my lifetime. I don't care. And your brain just doesn't care anymore. So if you're not a person who keeps up with names, that's not a sign of dementia. But on your loved one of the things I ask is Glenda, can you feel the information up here in your brain, but you can't get it to come out? Or do you know the information should be in your brain and you can't find it? Parkinson's and Lewy body people will tell you they can feel the information up here, but they can't make it come out. Alzheimer's people will tell you, I know I should know that, and it's not there anymore. And so 2 different ways we see memory, thought processes, and language being used. Visual spatial processing is changing again because of brain damage. Your loved one begins to have falls, partially because of visual spatial processing. It's normal for people with dementia to be bruised from the shoulder down to the knee because of an inability to process visual spatial, which is my ability to see myself in the area around me and to tell how close I am to a chair. So people with dementia tend to walk into chairs, into tables, into walls, into doorways, into doors, because they're simply not able to process that. Another thing you may notice is that a parent who always could find their way around a new city suddenly gets lost in the neighborhood. And you can't say to somebody with dementia, oh, they know not to leave the neighborhood, because that's simply not true. They only know what their brain is telling them in this moment. But pay attention to visual and what's going on around them, because these are things, again, the doctor needs to know. Executive function is looked at. Executive function is your ability to plan an event and carry it out. And so you have to ask yourself, can your loved one actually do the steps to plan, process, carry out, and complete a task? Now, one of the ways we check executive function, Glenda, is with something called a 3-stage command. I say to the person, I want you to pick that paper up with your right hand, fold it in half, and lay it on the floor. In the beginning of stage 5, a person can do that. Towards the end of stage 5, the person can pick the paper up in their right hand and fold it in half, but not remember to put it on the floor. So they now do a 2-stage command. And in stage 6, the person can only do a 1-stage command, which means pick the paper up in your right hand, is all their brain can hold on to. So that means as I try to get them to do their activities of daily living, I can get a lot of pushback, a lot of aggression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of agitation, because I gave them too many things to do at once, when what they really needed was only 1 step or 2 steps at a time. Executive function means we're using all 5 key cognitive domains. You have to be able to concentrate. You have to be able to remember, to use old memory, which tells you how to do this thing again. You have to be able to plan and strategize. That's your executive function. Calculation and problem solving is using working memory, and the speed at which you're able to do things. All of those things come together and they're affected. Is there now a social issue with your loved one? Does your loved one behave appropriately in social situations? And Glenda, I can't tell you the number of stories I have of people who insisted grandma come to the wedding because they wanted her at the wedding in the video, and yet in spite of being told not to, they brought grandma anyway. And in the middle of their wedding video, they've got grandma standing up, cussing everybody out and storming out of the church because the wedding was an hour past her normal bedtime. And nobody thought, what are grandma's needs? What are my loved ones' needs versus what I want? It may mean that you have trouble getting ready for church or synagogue or temple, that you're not able to go do your religious things because they no longer behave appropriately because of brain damage, not trying to misbehave, but it's brain damage. And you may witness impulsive behavior, especially frontal temporal dementia behavioral variant. This person's going to get inches away from your face, not 3 feet away from your face. And everything that they're doing all goes back to brain damage that's occurring. Are you noticing any sleep disturbances? While you're in their home, you're playing detective. So are you hearing this horrible snoring sound as they're sitting there because they've fallen asleep watching TV with you, but they're snoring and their mouth is shut. That's not snoring, that's sleep apnea. And obstructive sleep apnea causes a vascular dementia. Now, that doesn't mean, Glenda, they're going to put on the sleep apnea machine, because it's nothing they ever learned before. And you and I never in our lives went to sleep with a snorkel on our mouth or on our nose. So you're not going to get a good outcome from a sleep study test or a sleep apnea machine. It's just going to make you more frustrated. Do they have REM sleep behavior disorder, which means they kick and punch violently in their sleep? Are you noticing excessive napping? They slept all night, got up and had breakfast and took a 10-hour nap. Or is there any change in daytime or nighttime sleep activities? These are all things the doctor needs to know and hear about. Early memory sign losses are memory loss, poor judgment, loss of spontaneity. Your person doesn't seem to have that same look of life in their eyes and in their face. It takes them longer to do a routine, normal daily task. Asking questions over and over and over again, the same questions, and you've already fed them and they've asked you now 10 times, why haven't you fed me? Trouble with money, wandering and getting lost. Glenda, I can't tell you how many people have said she knows not to leave the neighborhood. He only drives to the store. And yet when they found her, she was 3 states away and 3 miles from her car in a desert. So no, they don't know to only do this thing. This person has brain damage. Losing things or misplacing them in odd places, mood and personality changes, and then increased anxiety or aggression. People with vascular dementia especially tend to be more physically and verbally aggressive. And Glenda, it's because you and I have a brain that works like this. And they can feel the hiccup in their brain. They can feel that they can't get the word out fast enough. And it literally makes them angry. And you're here, so you're the person I'm going to direct that anger at. And so that is a common thing to see. And it is very difficult to not take offense to that. You literally, when I look at people, Glenda, because of what I do, I look at them and I see their brain damage. When they move this way, I think, okay, that part's gone. When they do this thing, I think, okay, that part's gone. I can see what's going on. It is real brain damage. It is not on purpose. And it is especially hard because your loved one is slowly going away, bit by bit and piece by piece, until they're no longer the mother you knew. They're no longer the father you had, and they have become a shell of who they were. We know now that mood disorders, especially depression and anxiety, cause or they exacerbate dementia, but they also can look like dementia. And now we know that this appears to be a very early and treatable sign of cognitive change. The problem is, this is a generation of people that don't necessarily believe that depression and anxiety are actually illnesses. They're actually diseases. The brain is not producing and using certain chemicals correctly. So we know that depression, and especially depression, appears to be a primary and treatable cause of cognitive change. And it usually appears about 10 years before somebody begins to think, my parent has dementia. And so to measure depression, we use the geriatric depression scale. And this is called the GDS. Because of this age group, the only place the word depression is used is in the title, Glenda. So we don't read the title to the person. We simply give them the test. And what I want you to do is go online and get the 30-question geriatric depression scale. The 15-question one is going to come up, but the 30-question one is just a little bit more complete. If your person, when you, and I would give the person the test, Glenda, because I'm there, they know I'm there to do stuff, I'm there to help them. But as a family member, I might have trouble doing that. So what I'm going to do instead is read the questions and answer them for my loved one based on what I've seen in the last week. So have they stopped going outside of the house and doing new things, or do they prefer to stay home? Do they seem happy with life? Do they think they have memory issues? Do they do these things? And if at the end I have circled 5 bolded yeses or 5 bolded no's, meaning one of the yeses is not in bold and the no is, or the yes is in bold and the no is not. If I've circled 5 of those, that's a positive test for depression, and that test needs to go to the doctor. The Hamilton rating scale we went through, that also is an early sign of cognitive change and something that's treatable. And the right anxiety medicine, Glenda, changes your life. And it goes to work right away. So it changes your life. So this is one of the hardest things we're asking families to do, is to test your loved one for depression and anxiety, get the paperwork to the doctor, and get them on an antidepressant and something for anxiety, and then see how the progression is for the rest of the life. And then forgetfulness, Glenda. What's normal and what's not? Normal aging, we all make a bad decision once in a while. In normal aging, we all forget a payment. I think right now, because of all the travel I've done, I've got like 7 you owe us a toll from this state envelopes. And I just keep putting it aside. I got to do it. It's on my list of things to do today. Missing a monthly payment, occasionally forgetting what day it is, those are normal things, normal forgetfulness. Sometimes forgetting which word to use, sometimes using the wrong word, normal. Losing things from time to time. Where did I put that stupid phone? Right? It used to be on the wall in the kitchen. We couldn't lose it, Glenda. It was on the wall in the kitchen, right? Couldn't lose it. Now we carry it around with us. It could slip down between my car seat and I can't find it. Those are normal. Dementia is making poor judgments or decisions a lot of the time. Dementia is problems taking care of monthly bills. Dementia is losing track of the day or the time or the year. Dementia is trouble having a conversation, following a conversation, and following a conversation about today. Dementia is misplacing things often, not being able to find them, and blaming someone else. So can you see the difference there, Glenda?
Absolutely. Makes me feel better.
Oh, I was going to think, okay, now that I've depressed you, are there any questions? But yay, I made you feel better. So good for me.
We've had a lot of questions, Tam. Let me go back through here and let me ask. Okay, Rebecca wanted to know, when you use the IQ code, do you use the long or the short version?
Use the long version because it's going to give the doctor a better idea. Okay,
great. And let me move forward a little bit. And the reason I'm reading these out loud is because we do have people that have called in on their phone. There's a lady, Kim, who was asking about her mom who's had dementia for 15 years, and she can easily sleep 12 to 15 hours a night. She's a light sleeper, but seems to sleep deep before waking. She also wears, you were talking about this just a minute ago, a sleep apnea mask on her nose. Should she wake her up earlier than that, her regular sleep pattern of 12 to 15 hours?
No.
Or just let her sleep?
I would let her sleep. She's, and it's not unusual that they reach deep sleep early in the morning, and I would let her sleep because that's when her brain is cleaning itself. So let's let her have that. And she doesn't have a job to get to. She has dementia. Let's let her sleep. One of the things, Glenda, that you and I get so angry about is we go into nursing homes and find out because of staffing, they begin to get people up at 4 a.m. And that's not right. That's totally wrong. So yeah, let's let mom sleep. My rule of thumb really is they have dementia. Let's feed them chocolate, keep them comfortable, and let them go.
Right. Absolutely. Another one, and you have discussed this on other calls, but it's an important question, I think. What are your thoughts about symptoms in people for dementia after having long haul COVID? And let's see, maybe they had or not underlying dementia prior to having COVID. MRI shows normal age-related signs, but overall it's clear as per the neurologist. It sounds like that this person may not have had symptoms before they had long haul COVID, and now they do. Is that right, Seema? Unmute your phone, Seema, so we can hear you.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, so she did not have symptoms of dementia before, but now since having COVID and long haul COVID, she now is having symptoms of dementia.
That would that would make sense, and let me try to explain why. You and I have 100 billion brain cells, neurons. Those neurons have 400 billion glial cells that assist them. You and I have 100,000 miles of blood vessels in our brain. So that's why neurosurgeons are so difficult. They can do incredible work with little teeny tiny cells, right? There seems to be a point, Glenda, where you and I can lose 20 billion brain cells. Not a big deal. But the minute we lose that next one, it is obvious that there is dementia. So if we take a person, and you and I know that early in the disease, it's very slow, it's very subtle. And if this person was highly educated, if they were naturally very, very smart, then they've got a brain that works more analytically. But the effects of COVID mean that the COVID virus bound to the ACE receptor cells in the lower parts of the lungs. And this is the area where oxygen gets transferred into the blood supply. And so we know that for especially people who maybe their dementia just wasn't noticed yet because they hadn't reached that tipping point, but after months and months and months of not really getting enough oxygen, the dementia is now apparent.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And their dementia would not have been tremendously advanced before then, because the mortality rate for stage 5 dementia is almost 60%. For stage 6, it's in the 70%. For stage 7, which is the bedbound person with dementia, it's almost 90%. So your person would have been very early, and then the effects of really not getting enough oxygen for the effects of what this virus does, it would make sense that y'all would now be able to see dementia.
Her last question was, is it okay for that person to be on a prescription for dementia, Aricept or whatever? Yeah, so that is
you would believe that was appropriate. You'd also want to stage your person, but you would believe that was appropriate because of how early they must have been in the disease. The numbers, if y'all remember when the pandemic started, the only numbers we got on dementia came out of Italy because they were about to go under. And that's where we got the mortality rates of how devastating this is to people with dementia. That's why we've tried so hard to keep it out of our communities, why it's been such a challenge. But what you're saying would make sense.
Kim asked, do you know about a device called Healy, Healy? It apparently uses frequency to read what a person's body needs and then delivers frequency. I've never heard of this, Tam.
I've never heard of this. Dementia is not a disease that works like that. Dementia is the failure of certain proteins in the brain to function correctly. And it's not understood which one fails first that causes the domino effect. But this is the death of cells. So yeah. I've not heard of anything like that. I know that there is research that looks very, very promising. Human trials have started again on a nasal spray. Those started about 5 years ago, and the nasal spray had marvelous effects except for the side effect of death. But they're hoping to avoid that on this one. So we are in human trials on several things. A lot of the researchers think that we're 5 to 10 years away from something that's actually helpful to people with dementia, and maybe something that will be helpful as something we would take beforehand.
Mm. Joanne asked that, and has made a statement that she's seen a lot of caregivers giving their loved ones inappropriate meds, especially for aggression or hallucinations. What are your suggestions for the best meds for depression, anxiety, and aggression? They've just
I don't do medication. I'm not a MD. I'm a PhD. But the first thing that we do for aggression is we do the pain ad, the pain assessment in advanced dementia. 50% of the behaviors of a person with dementia are the untreated pain that comes from living for decades. Every decade, you and I get another level of pain added to us. It's just that it's slow and subtle and happens over our lifetime. So the first thing we would do is we would treat for pain. Then we would build a timeline. What does this person's behavior, what is the actual behavior? The most common thing I'm told, Glenda, is this little old lady beats the hell out of everybody all day long, and that's simply not possible. So we have to begin to find out what is the exact behavior, because there are behaviors that indicate certain things. If you walk by me, Glenda, and I suddenly hit, kick, or punch you without any provocation, that's a sign of untreated pain. It's not a sign of a mean old person. That's untreated pain. So the first thing we do is check for pain. Then the second thing we do is look at the caregiver. Is the caregiver approaching the person correctly, which means down on their eye level, and I'm looking directly in their eyes and they're looking directly in mine? Because if not, they don't really see us due to visual changes that occur from brain damage. So if I'm a fighter and you suddenly pop out next to me, I'm going to hit you. If I'm a freezer or a fleer, I'm going to freeze or I'm going to flee. But we know that 50% of behaviors are untreated pain. 20% of the behaviors are the person who's the caregiver approaching incorrectly. So we have to first correct those two things. Then we can begin to look at what else is going on with the person.
That makes perfect sense. Just listening at all of this, it seems like it's so important for caregivers to keep a diary, a log with dates so that they can track these things in addition to doing all of the pain ad, the HAM-A, all of those other things and taking it to the doctor. But I think a diary would, or a log.
It's an hourly log. And in that log, if we were doing this in a community, we would write down what time this behavior happened. Because if the behavior happens every day at 2, it means that there's a medicine that's running out. Some medicine that controls that behavior, they've now acclimated to, and they need a different dosage. We look at who is in the community around them and how did they approach them. What exactly happened? The most common thing is that little old lady beats the hell out of everybody, and that's simply not true. Did she really hit you in the face with a balled up fist, or were you trying to change her and she was simply pushing you away? So most behaviors occur during our activities of daily living. Those are transfer, ambulate, toilet, bathe, groom, dress, and eat. We do that in the morning twice. We have to get the person up, feed them, and then toilet them. So those are big times. Lunchtime, when we're feeding again and toileting, and then bedtime, feeding, toileting, and then getting the person ready for bed. So if we were following this in a community, we would be writing down who is the caregiver, what time of the day did the behavior occur, what exactly was the behavior. Because nobody's beating the hell out of everybody all day long. If they were, they'd be in a psych hospital. So the more information we can gather, a lot of times we can figure out for ourselves what we're doing wrong, but otherwise this gives the doctor a true look at what's going on in the day and allows that doctor to help you do better care for your loved one in terms of being able to handle that behavior.
Right.
And remember, most people with dementia have at least one behavioral episode a day, and that's due to untreated pain or to care during the activities of daily living.
Would you kind of address, we've gone over, Tam, are you all right with that? Some days
sure.
You have something right after. Would you talk about dementia medications? Wanda had wanted to know about the different medications and what side effects may be. She had with my husband neighbor, it made them look like a zombie.
Some people are not able to take the medications because it just has such a detrimental effect on them. The medications for dementia are Aricept, Razidine, and Exelon, and they all now have a generic form. What they allow the brain to do is to make a chemical interaction happen between the cells one more time. They are intended to be started in stages 2, 3, or the early part of stage 4, with the National Institutes of Health research indicating that about 70% of people would then go ahead and progress into old age and die of age-related events such as heart attack and stroke. Just that's how human beings die. And those people would not develop the debilitating effects of dementia. Instead, most of our country, people with dementia are not diagnosed until stage 5 of the disease, and they are still given this medication even though they've now lost half a pound of brain tissue. So what the medication does then is it draws out stages 5, 6, and 7 on average 2 to 3 years, which is $200,000 to $300,000 in care, and you're drawing out the worst part of the disease when your loved one has the least amount of brain tissue left. And so for families, nobody talks to you about this was the purpose of the medicine and this is what will happen if it's given to them now. And so that is very challenging for families. Most of those medications, if your loved one is on them, will be withdrawn in late stage 6 because they're no longer viable. If your loved one is on them now and you take them off, they will have about a 30-day window of half-life of the drug, and then the drug will be out of their system and they will decline to where they actually are in the disease, and it usually will terrify you, and at that point they cannot go back on the medicine. The second medicine is Namenda. Namenda stops the brain from building up too much glutamate. The brain normally makes glutamate, but when you and I reach deep sleep, our brain washes itself clean of it. And in people with dementia, the blood-brain barrier is damaged as part of the brain damage. And so the brain can't wash the glutamate out, and that's what Namenda is used for. And those are the medications that we have.
Thank you so much. For those of you on the phone and those that are on the Zoom call, I'm typing a message right now, but we will send out links to the various scales that Tam has talked about today. If you register for this call, you can look for that in a follow-up email. I was trying to think. Yeah, that's what Joy had asked about, the link for the geriatric depression anxiety test. So yeah, we will.
You can just Google them too. You can Google geriatric depression scale. You can Google HAM-A. You can Google IQ code, and it'll give you all of those things.
Okay. Let's see, it's a quarter after. Do you have time for maybe one more question, Tam?
Oh, sure.
Anyone have a question that we haven't addressed that you need an immediate response? For those of you on the phone, I did give Tam's phone number, and let me give that to you. It's area code 254-216-3668. And she really does let you call her, and she will answer eventually and get back to you. So if you have a question.
If I haven't answered you since December, you need to send me another note because I've been in bed. Yeah, I'm behind, so call me again. Yeah.
Right. So if you have phoned in, you can unmute your phone pressing *6 on Zoom. You can ask a question on the chat, and those are the ones that we've been answering. Or you can unmute your phone, and I'll be able to see that your phone is unmuted and call on you. So anybody have a final question for us? I'm scanning here because there's a lot of people on the call. Okay, sleepwalking and how to handle that when somebody has dementia.
Well, quite a few things. You need to have a latch at the top of your door. Never in our lives were we taught to look up and unlock a door. And the last thing you want is for them to actually walk out of your house while you're deep in REM sleep, because you won't hear them. We put a 3-foot black rug in front of exit doors because it's hard for people with dementia to step across that black rug because it looks like a big hole to them. You can put a, used to be able to buy these at Michael's, or you can have the grandkids make stop signs. They literally will walk up to the door with a stop sign on it and stop. So what you most want to do if you have a sleepwalker is make sure the house is secure so that they can't leave. We have stories every year of people who walked out in the middle of a snowstorm, people who walked out and just kept walking until they had something bad happen. And the easiest way to do that is to secure your home from the inside. When they're sleepwalking, sleepwalking is actually really, really rare. So I would want to mention this to the doctor, and then we would want to lead them back to bed. And remember, sometimes I get up and walk because my bed's not warm enough. I like thick covers on my bed. But we need to secure the home so that they're not able to get out of the house. And we need to talk to the doctor because sleepwalking is not something we normally see in humans or in people with dementia.
Good. Jaylee, did you have a question?
I just wanted you to repeat her phone number.
Oh, okay. Area code 254-216-3668.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, Natalie, did you have a question?
Just a follow-up question about the sleepwalking. If it's rare in somebody that has dementia, why would it be happening usually? What's the cause?
It is rare, period. It is something you need to discuss with your physician.
Okay.
Okay, it's just not something that happens. She may be half awake and y'all aren't realizing it. It may be an interaction of a medication, but the doctor needs to be made aware of it. It certainly increases her fall risk. And honestly, I've never heard of somebody with dementia sleepwalking. So that makes me think we need to call the doctor. And remember, when you call doctors, it's not their mama. So you got to get their attention.
Yes.
Okay.
She was having like very vivid dreams, almost like nightmares, where she would think somebody was stealing the car outside, and she actually would like see somebody in the car. She thought she did.
Okay, that's called, excuse me, an hallucination. So we need to talk to the doctor about that, or it could be a perception issue. A hallucination is something I see, hear, or smell that's not real. A perception issue is something more that an Alzheimer's person would have, because you and I are sitting on the couch and a car drives down the road and it makes a shadow go across the window, and our brain looks at that and goes, car shadow window, and dismisses it. But a person with Alzheimer's might look at that and insist that there's a person over there in the car. I also would want my doctor to know that whatever is happening with my mother medically, my mother is having night terrors. Okay, that are actually waking her up and making her check the house, because that could be an interaction of medication. And remember, when you talk to the doctor about medication, Dr. A does not look at Dr. B's medication, and your family member may have 5 or 6 specialists. Does not mean they are looking at each other's medicines, because each doctor is a specialist, and so they don't look at the other medicines because that's not their specialty. So I would ask my pharmacist to check if there's any interaction with any of the medications my mother is on that could be causing this. They're wonderful. They have a program that tells them if anything interacts, but it also means anything over the counter. It also means going through the house and making sure there is nothing else in the house that she can get into. A lot of times people with dementia or older people will get pain medication, and they're tougher than you and I are. They don't take the pain medication, they put it up. I knew a guy once that his wife died and his doctor was worried about him, and he kept filling him a Valium prescription each month, and the guy wouldn't use it. He tossed it in a box. And by the time I met him, there were 40 bottles of Valium in the box.
No word.
Wow.
I know. You know how much that's worth at a high school? I could have made a fortune, I tell you. So make sure that you're including any over-the-counter medicine. And this goes for any of you when you're dealing with your loved one. Any over-the-counter medicine can have an effect on the prescription medicine your loved one is on. So take it all to the pharmacist, make nice with the pharmacist, and they will run a check on everything and see if you're getting some weird interaction. But if my parent with dementia was having night terrors, I'd be calling the doctor.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
and then
Natalie, for that.
Secure the home so they can't leave in the middle of the night. It's your worst fear. The other thing is go to a Tuesday morning and buy a baby monitor and put the monitor in their room and the other monitor in your room so that you can hear what they're doing in the night.
Thank you so much.
Excellent suggestions, Tam. Well, we've gone way over, and I want to thank Tam for hanging in there with us. She's always glad to do that unless she has something immediately following the session. And she didn't today, thank goodness. And thank goodness she's well. So thank you so much, Tam. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Like I said, you can always get in hold of Tam. If we did not get to your question today, I apologize for that. But she will answer your telephone messages and emails. So please feel free to do that. Watch for the follow-up email that we're going to be sending out. Somebody wanted us to include what those meds were in that email, Tam. So I'll be reaching out to you about that. So once again, stay safe. Tam, you have any closing words for us?
Everybody take a deep breath. You do not have dementia. You're just a stressed out caregiver. Okay. Right. But you got to, when you're sitting there and thinking, this is killing me. Okay. When you can tell the stress level that it's taking on you. If money's an issue, look at respite care. Community will take your loved one for a week or 2 weeks to give you a chance to get a break. You really do have to take care of yourself, because if something happens to you, who is going to step forward? And some of you have found out not a single family member is going to step forward. Right. So take care of yourselves. Okay. That is especially critical in this time. Some of you have been now locked down for 2 years or more with your loved one. It takes a toll on you mentally. Okay. If I spend 24 hours a day with a dementia person, it begins to affect me mentally. So you've got to find a way to carve out time for yourself. And we're going to send you out a stress tip list of things to do. And they're all things that can happen in just less than a minute. And then others, excuse me, are things like journaling, writing a letter to yourself about what a good caregiver you've been. That's a very powerful thing. And then learning to do meditation of some form. All are things that will be helpful to you. Your loved one can't do meditation because of brain damage, but for you and I, meditation is the very best exercise for our brain. I do it twice a day. Even when I was sick, Glenda, I was still breathing. Barely. Barely, but I was breathing. So take care of yourselves. And when when you've reached your point, you can put your loved one in respite care. Okay. And remember, this is a medical disease. This is real. They require medical care. Okay. So take care of yourselves as well.
And my final words would be to have a plan. A plan is so important to caregivers. And also put on your detective hat, because that's what you need to do. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Tam, for your presentation.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, WellMed. And
bye-bye.
Bye.